So my answer to that would be, as you're finding, like, still dive into private label, still go into wholesale. If you're asking whether you should or you shouldn't, there's no better time than now. If you wait, that going in now will be better than going in 3 months, right? If it's a question of whether it's still possible, the answer is very much yes. It is very much still possible.
Welcome, fellow entrepreneurs, to the Entrepreneur Adventure Podcast, where we talk about Amazon wholesale and how you can use it to build an e-commerce empire, a side hustle, or anything in between. And now, your host, Todd Welch.
All right, so today I have Cameron Yoder on the podcast, and he is a successful e-commerce entrepreneur. He's been the marketing lead, or is the marketing lead currently, for Viral Launch. And he also has successful Amazon businesses that he's built. He's the head of operations at Big Black Tea, for example. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, Cameron. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, Todd, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And this is odd. This is odd for me because usually I'm on the other side. Usually I'm in your spot asking the questions. So it's a good mix up. So my name's Cam. Many people, I'm not sure actually if your audience is familiar with my background with Viral Launch and what I've done there, but I'll just give you kind of a broad overview of my path through e-commerce. So I started e-commerce when I was in high school. I started flipping stuff. I started doing arbitrage. Going to thrift stores. I didn't do online arbitrage. I did just thrift store shopping. I did a lot of clothes, like selling Nike stuff online. Got into selling used electronics. At one point in time, VCRs were really just a great flip. And I had a plug to get some VCRs for really cheap. People would buy VCRs. I really don't know why, but I started flipping my way through high school and college, and actually made a decent amount of money to pay my way through college through arbitrage. And through arbitrage, kind of a classic e-commerce journey, I guess, as I was asking myself how I wanted to elevate my game, found private label and started diving into that path a bit. And that's kind of where my e-commerce path crossed with tech. And that's where I met Casey Goss as I was graduating. That's how I got into Viral Launch. I had a good friend, Lindsay Todd, who was an early employee at Viral Launch, who connected me with Casey. And through that, I took a deep dive into Viral Launch, into the e-commerce game, into private labels specifically. Met a lot of Amazon sellers early on in the private label journey. And through my time at Viral Launch, I learned a lot. And through that, I was encouraged to start my own private label operations, partnered with Lindsay actually, and a couple of my own. And through that journey, it's been a crazy couple years at my time with Viral Launch and outside of Viral Launch. But since then, I've launched a couple brands, private label, specifically, that's been largely my focus, dabbled in drop shipping, and have since then focused on Amazon and Shopify as my primary levers for my own personal e-commerce operations. So that's the broad stroke of my experience, I guess.
All right, nice. Yeah, there's no better way to learn than by actually doing it, right? Because you started your e-commerce adventure while you were getting started at Viral Launch, or after you'd been there a little while, right?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a clear difference between, you can get so much from talking with and learning from other people, but until you actually really get into the weeds, it's tough to put a lot of those principles into practice.
So for those who don't know what Viral Launch is, why don't you give us an overview of what Viral Launch is, what it does, why people might want to use it?
Yeah, Viral Launch is, people who sell are probably pretty familiar with the fact that there are tools and software out in the Amazon space now that basically make selling a whole lot easier. And Viral Launch acts as one of those software providers that gives sellers tools, a much easier way to sell at the highest level. That's what we do. And there are different tools in that help, of course, make the process easier, like finding keyword search volume or making it easier to discover better products to sell on Amazon. But essentially, Viral Launch acts as a way to service the Amazon seller, service people who want to get in and who are already in, to make the process a whole lot easier and to make the game just elevated. Like as e-commerce is going on, and we're going to talk about the future of e-commerce today, but as time goes on, things are just getting more and more competitive, and tools and software just in general in the Amazon space and e-commerce space really help people elevate their game and help separate themselves from the competition. So that's what Viral Launch is at a high level, and that's just generally what software is used for in e-commerce.
Viral Launch, from what I know about Viral Launch, because we were talking beforehand and I've been more of a Jungle Scout user. What I know of Viral Launch is back in the day, it was really good for launching a private label product. They would put it out there to people who would want to get maybe a free product or deeply discounted and get those gray area reviews that we all remember that we can't really do anymore. So what has it evolved into since then? Tell us a little bit about some of the specific tools that you guys have.
Yeah, the evolution is really interesting because, just even looking at this past year, man, it's easy to see how much e-commerce and Amazon has changed in a year. And since Viral Launch's inception, so much has changed. So really the evolution away from, because you're right, we started out as kind of this launch service, right? Where when launching was, I guess, a little bit more easy to pull off than it is today. That was our primary focus. But as time has gone on, launching doesn't really remain a very good long-term strategy, I think, for a software business. So like we asked ourselves like what we thought the future of someone in our shoes would be, or just a software provider of Amazon sellers. And really we found that as time went on, aggregating data and outputting that data in a useful way for Amazon sellers was the answer, was the key, at least was a key. So moving away from launching and moving into software, using data to help make smarter sourcing decisions, but also selling decisions. That's like the broad stroke of where we've gone and why. And really, I would say like our honest goal is to be this sort of, so personally, like my personal anecdote is I'm all about automation. That's just what I love to do. I think when you can get more tools under your belt that help automate a lot of manual tasks, it saves you a lot of time, and it also saves you from even having to start a team. Because I think there are a lot of things that teams can do that tools will be able to do or already can do, especially with the introduction of something like machine learning or AI. And so the Viral Launch goal is really to be this data-oriented, sophisticated solution to help people automate a lot of processes in the selling process, but also just to make data really digestible and to be really complex, but in an easy to understand way. So that's kind of the evolution away from launching, even though launching still works in a certain capacity, not even necessarily because we don't really focus on launching anymore, but there are some pretty cool ways to still make launches a thing for private label products. So that's what we've done. That's the evolution of Viral Launch over the past couple of years, at least.
Okay, very good. So with Viral Launch, I'm assuming you guys have like tools and things where I could go to a listing on Amazon and it would give me data on that listing, like how many sales it gets, the best keywords, and maybe break down the reviews and things like that.
Yeah. So there right now we have 9 tools and we have a couple more on the way. Really, that's one example. Like we call it competitor intelligence, right? Other people have different names for different tools, but doing something like reverse ASIN lookup, like we were one of the first to do reverse ASIN lookups with ASINs, and evaluating competitor ASINs, seeing what keywords they're targeting, seeing what ads they're running for specific products. That's an example. Other tools, like your audience is primarily wholesale, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So looking up like product discovery is largely what a lot of people use Viral Launch for primarily, and product discovery isn't just private label. It's more so analyzing and analyzing a lot of data in Amazon's platform to find specific functions. And, a product finder isn't necessarily unique in the Amazon software space, but it's how the data is interpreted and how the data is output and the different functions of these tools that kind of separate them and distinguish them from other people. And so for wholesalers, for example, we've had wholesaler groups come into our platform solely for the purpose of utilizing product discovery to find potential wholesale products, not just private label. So that's an example. And there are a lot of resources. I could go through each tool. I won't do that though. I won't go through each tool individually, but I'll give you some resources that you can point people to if you want to just walk through what each of the tools do and walk through what the data, how the data is different, and what separates us from other people as well. But I don't just want this to be like a viral launch pitch as well. I'm here to just spread who I am also and my own personal e-commerce knowledge too.
For sure. I just want to give people an idea on what Viral Launch is, so they can definitely head on over to check out virallaunch.com, get more information about that. Because I think it's, in my world, in the Amazon wholesale world, pretty much everybody knows Jungle Scout. Not necessarily everybody knows Viral Launch. So it's always good to know that there's multiple competing companies out there, so you can try different tools, see what works for you. So definitely check out Viral Launch if anybody's interested in that kind of stuff. Your e-commerce companies that you have, I believe you have multiple e-commerce companies, right?
I do. So the one that you mentioned at the beginning, Big Black Tea, that is a sort of, I would describe that as a sort of experiment that I'm running with my business partner, Lindsay. So we have a couple private label operations, right? Private label products that we started to learn the system, and just to honestly dive into the private label world ourselves. That's just another personal business asset. But Big Black Tea, we had the idea of bringing our e-commerce knowledge and partnering with influencers. Our concept with Big Black Tea is that it's not just ours. We actually partnered with an influencer. His name is Tim Salau. And we're working with him. The concept behind Big Black Tea is to create a product for an influencer and to have that product instantly plug into an influencer's community. So the idea is, instead of having to go out and scour the internet through ads to bring customers in to buy a product, why not tap into an influencer's market and instantly create a product for an influencer that the audience responds well to, so that products will sell as a result of this natural, organic product that the influencer wants to push, rather than creating something like a merch, just merch like t-shirts or something that people will buy. So that's the concept behind Big Black Tea. So it's not just a private label product. It's not just a CPG brand. It's a sort of co-brand with an influencer to test out what it looks like to tap into that sort of influencer marketing.
For sure. I think that's huge in marketing nowadays, getting influencers to use your product, and almost more of in an organic way, but you're doing it intentionally, going out there and trying to find those influencers. Do you mind sharing a few of the influencers that you guys are working with?
Yeah, well, so just this one. So the concept is it's not just influencer marketing, right? So it's not like Lindsay and I are selling a product and we're reaching out to influencers to feature our product. With Big Black Tea, the tea itself, Lindsay and I are working with one influencer to push to his audience. So he's a LinkedIn influencer. So he has like 100,000 people. So the concept was, we focus on we partner with this influencer, not a bunch, but we partner with this one guy, and we have him push this one product. And that's the concept that we're moving with, rather than trying to create one product and pull a bunch of influencers in. We're partnering with one main influencer, push hard into his audience, create a product that really resonates well. And then from there, what we're actually seeing is, because we're putting a lot of energy into one influencer with a lot of influence, we're finding that other influencers are actually asking to be a part of the ecosystem. They're actually asking to feature the product, just one product themselves. So and I said it was an experiment for a reason, because it's not something that a lot of people are doing. And we don't even know if it's going to work long term. We really believe that it will. But it's in a way, it's just another form of influencer advertising, but it's sort of a meshing of private label and influencer marketing. That's the best way to describe it, I think.
Very good. So as far as how it's working, your sales, are you driving those to Amazon, or are you driving to Shopify store, or?
We're solely doing Shopify right now, partly because we wanted to control the inventory a bit more. Because this is a sort of experiment, we just wanted more control right now. Amazon, of course, has the platform, right? But most people know you kind of lose the control, more control when you tap into Amazon's platform. So for the sake of control for the sake of the experiment itself, we are solely focusing on Shopify. We're not even doing, we're not doing like a 3PL like deliver. We're handling the logistics ourselves right now for that pure sense of control. And we've seen enough to know that we are going to scale faster than we thought originally with this experiment. So we're really, after this initial experiment phase, we're really going to work on expanding, tapping into Amazon. We're going to put it on Amazon because now we've seen enough to know that this working instead of trying to pull people in, focusing on a pre-existing group of like with this influencer is enough now that we see to actually push a private label product up. So the idea is to just instantly tap, like Amazon sellers work on building an audience, right? Like Amazon sellers work on building a list of people to push products to. The idea of this is to tap into a pre-existing audience. And we've seen enough to know that that works. And so we're going to create an Amazon listing to push those people to funnel into the Amazon listing, and which will then, of course, positively affect its growth. And other organic customers will then come in from Amazon's side and push it up. So to answer your question, we're on Shopify. That's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that's the plan right now.
Yeah, and that's a really cool idea, using an influencer like that just to build a brand. And
right.
We were talking about launching, viral launch. You have your own launch built in, right? When you go on Amazon,
right.
All you do is you have that influencer run some kind of discount, direct that traffic over to Amazon, and boom, you've got your launch. And I think
right.
that's the way of the future. Not necessarily having to use an influencer, although that's awesome, but building your platform, your email list, and your audience outside of Amazon.
Right.
And taking advantage of that to launch on Amazon, it gives you a leg up from anybody else out there.
No, I think you're so right. I mean, this kind of starts diving into the future a bit, which it's applicable at this point. But really, I think the perspective over the past, I think we're at a turning point. I think we're at a turning point right now in the Amazon ecosystem. I think that largely Amazon for the past little while has been very singular focused, meaning that as people come into Amazon's platform, and I'm speaking to wholesalers, I'm speaking to private label, I'm speaking to arbitrage, it's been very segmented and siloed, meaning that I think that the thought wasn't necessarily for me as a seller, me as an Amazon person, to build a connected ecosystem of products. But just talking about the future of branding, talking about the future of product itself, even talking about the future of Amazon with bigger sellers coming into the space, with big money coming into the space. The interviews that I've done over the past, 5 months, the common theme is that there will be big money coming into the Amazon space in 2021 and 2022. You look at like Thrasio, you look at other companies that are buying up Amazon businesses and operations, and that being a factor. What's the combatant against, as a small seller or as an individual, what's the combatant against that? Largely, and this is a broad answer, but largely it's building one cohesive ecosystem for you to help create this interconnected group of customers that are loyal to you, not as a person, but as a brand. And that's a little bit more private label-y, but that's the idea, that's the direction that I largely see Amazon going.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's moving that way pretty rapidly. And that's going to make a lot of people think, well, how can I even get started if these big people are coming into it? So how would you answer someone who's asking you that?
Someone who's not even on Amazon?
Yeah, who's just like, okay, I heard about this private label thing, or I heard about this wholesale thing and I want to do it. What are your thoughts on getting started now if you're just starting?
No, it's a great question. Honestly, I think the answer is still somewhat similar to what I would give before, but there's just like a little tag on the end. It's like you can still start a private label business or a wholesale business like you did before. But there are a couple things that are going to go with it, and it's the recognition that it's probably going to be a little bit more involved and a little bit more difficult than it was before. There's going to be more competition in the space. So it's going to involve a little bit more time from your end. So my answer to that would be, as you're finding, like, still dive into private label, still go into wholesale. If you're asking whether you should or you shouldn't, there's no better time than now. If you wait, that going in now will be better than going in 3 months, right? If it's a question of whether it's still possible, the answer is very much yes. It is very much still possible. My encouragement to people right now, as they're considering getting in for like the first time, is to really consider a more long-term approach to your selling on Amazon than a short-term one. What does that look like? That looks like we just were talking about, creating a more cohesive brand. What does that look like? That looks like, if you're looking at a product and you're like, okay, well, I think I should sell like this pet sweater or a coffee mug in my store. My encouragement for people coming in to Amazon is to consider picking one sort of area to focus on, meaning one type of product, and to start building a brand based around that product. And I'm speaking from the private label perspective, so you'll have to forgive me because that's largely my focus. But from a private label perspective, what people have historically done is done something like pick individual products that don't align or don't match based on pure metrics and sell those and do well. And I still think that is possible right now in the Amazon space. But I think if you're betting on the future growth, if you're betting on you still being around, if you're saying that you're in this for a long term and not just for a quick buck, or even for a quick buck, I think that the best way to go, the best way to start, is to find a product that matches core metrics and to expand on that and to pick products that flow together more cohesively. So it's still, to beginners, I would say it's still possible. And in that, after knowing it's still possible, you got to have your mind set on building a brand. Think Away. Like, do you know what Away is?
No.
The brand?
Sure.
It's a luggage. It's like a travel luggage brand. So Away took a model. Their branding is fantastic, by the way. If you look them up, just go to Google, type in Away. It's a really good example because they focus on one core area, which is luggage and it's travel. And they built an entire product line around that. That idea, I think, is what I encourage people to start moving towards. It's not like you have to be there right now, but it's like, at the very least, start putting yourself in that brand-oriented mindset. There's a lot to learn there, but at the very least, orienting yourself in that way and saying, my path is the path of the brand, at the very least, then that will get you started on a good path.
Yep. I agree 100%. If you're doing the private label route, gone are the days of just going to AliExpress and being like, yeah, that looks good. I'll throw that up there, because you're going to have 1,000 people competing with you and tanking the price. To bring it into kind of the wholesale world, that's kind of what I look for when I'm looking for products to sell, are brands that are good brands outside of Amazon, but maybe their Amazon presence is lacking. And so I can start selling their products, do some improvements on the listings. And because of their brand that they've built outside of Amazon, it's a lot easier to just get that ball rolling really good on Amazon, maybe turn that into an exclusive agreement where I can help the brand and things like that. So building that.
So I'm curious, what elements, when you talk about branding and wanting to recognize like a brand that's been built out of it, what are some of the key elements that you actually like really look for when you see a brand that's like, yes, that is one that I want to reach out to? What are some of the factors that stand out?
Going to be a known brand, at least in the niche that they're in.
Right.
I can tell you the brand of some of the products that I sell, and you probably wouldn't know them, because you might if you're in the niche, but odds are that you're not going to know them. But I'm familiar with that niche, and so I know that they're a good brand. They've built their name up. They've got a selection of products, that all kind of relate to each other and go along with each other. Maybe they're in a lot of retail stores and things like that. And so they've just built their name up more than anything.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that you bring up a good point that, have you ever read Russell Brunson's books?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. He's and this is general marketing and still I think the future of e-commerce and business, but we're getting into a point of niching down, right? Like niching down is largely I think a really good tactic to have as an e-commerce seller. And you said yourself, I just want to pull out what you said, which was you're very familiar with your niches, right? I think that's something that both wholesalers and private label sellers can really benefit from is picking a niche at least to dive into, or a couple. You probably have multiple niches that you're very familiar with. And diving into those niches, you don't have to become a master overnight, but starting to dive into what those niches are about, what brands in those niches really stick out and why. And the why is important. And that will teach you things about the wholesale. It'll give you starting points for wholesaling, and it'll give you starting points for private label as well. Because if you recognize what makes a brand great in that niche, I mean, that's what'll point you to the right brands to wholesale. That's what'll point you to the right brands to emulate in your own private label products as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm almost to the point where I can just be looking at products on Amazon and be like, right there, that one I can do something with. And it's really nice too, because I can translate into that private label world as well, because I see all these products from these brands that are relatively known in their niche, but their products are not doing really anything on Amazon. Right. So I'm thinking to myself, I could create that product, improve it a little bit, put it up on Amazon and dominate that space pretty easy. So I see these opportunities all over the place. It's just that taking advantage of them is the hard part sometimes, but when you get familiar with a niche, it's really helpful to be able to speak the language and be able to pick up on little things.
It's just interesting. Like, I think a lot of Amazon sellers just aren't aware of the knowledge that they gain through the process of selling, whether it be wholesale or private label. I mean, just even from the business oriented side of things, like you are a product marketer, you are a product developer. You are developing a business, you are developing a brand. And Amazon business is the encompassment of all of those things. And as you go, you develop broader skill sets, I think, than people are familiar, than people think they are actually developing. And I think it's important to point those things out. Those are important skills that you will develop going through the process of selling. And I'm actually curious, is your audience are they largely beginning? Like, are they just starting out? Are they already selling? Is it kind of a mixture?
It's going to skew more towards the beginners. Okay. It's going to be all across the spectrum.
Got it. Okay. I love the beginner segment. That's where my heart's at. That is where my heart's at.
Absolutely. So aside from the Big Black Tea, what other e-commerce brands do you have going?
Yeah. So without diving into the names of the brands specifically, it's largely in the office niche. So it's that office paper. That is kind of the niche that I stumbled into. I think stumbling into niches is probably a more common theme among Amazon sellers than not. But largely, those are the products that I've focused on. And I dove into pet also initially, but dropped pet after after seeing how involved the customers were in the product life cycle. I kind of dropped that and focused on office and then now CPG.
Yeah, I feel like in pet, there's going to be a lot more competition in pet than probably office space or office paper.
Yeah, competition and of course more flexibility, I think, with what a product does and looks like. But one thing that I learned just going into something like pet, and I've had friends go into baby as well and see a similar thing, the customers are just very involved in what they want the product to be. And you're dealing with people's pets, you're dealing with people's babies and baby, not pets. And in that, you're going to find a lot of more difficulty in the types of customers that you're bringing in, as opposed to something like office. And that's just something that, as you dive into, speaking to the beginner segment, as you dive into niches and you start selling, pivoting is important. It's a key element in selling as well. But as you dive into certain niches, you'll find certain things that you don't like, or certain things that you just don't want to, that aren't preferential for you. And it's important to be able to ask yourself, what you want after learning what some of those things are. Pet was an example, not something that I personally wanted to dive into and be a part of. So I just pivoted, took my losses, and I was like, all right, this isn't for me. I want something else.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes that's important. If things aren't working, you got to make a change sometimes.
Right.
So you just got to go with the flow. And then when you find something that's working, go full steam ahead in it. So how are those brands working or going for you overall? Do you mind sharing numbers?
Yeah. So I would say I've actually stopped focusing on private label as much. So right now, my sphere of influence largely is full time at Viral Launch, combined with the CPG of the black tea, and more so the concept and experiment behind that, as well as private label. And in that, I started to actually pull some of my time away from private label, from the automation on that side, to focus on the other things. But so largely just focusing on numbers, like around $500,000 in a year. Like so it's nothing crazy, but it's enough from at least one brand in that side to keep on going and to keep it moving at the very least.
Yep, very good. I think a lot of people would be very happy selling a $500,000 a year. So
yeah. I mean, it's not a bad thing, right? And that's top line revenue. I think that's for people who are listening who aren't selling yet or are just starting out. Like, Amazon sellers toss out numbers often, like I just did, and I feel the need. I honestly feel the need to correct myself in saying, like, that's top line revenue. So that's not money that I'm pocketing.
Yep.
Maybe I'm pocketing like a small portion of that, but a large portion of that is I'm choosing to put back into the business. So it's not like when I say $500,000, it's like, wow, Cameron's making $500,000 a year. No, it's like it's a very small portion of that I'm actually pulling in, and I'm putting the rest back into the business to grow.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. That's super important. A lot of people like to throw around the flashy numbers, which is fun. It can get people excited, but you got to know, I could sell $10 million this year and lose 11, but the 10 million sounds really cool.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing that because you're in the game, like you understand what people say. And I think it's easy to also if you're in it, it's easy to get lost in just saying those numbers, right? Because we throw them around so much. So it's not like it's not like everyone's trying to deceive everybody by throwing around top line revenue, but it's just for people who aren't in the game quite yet, it is an important thing to keep in mind as you hear some of these numbers thrown around.
Yeah. You got to know the margins, and the bottom line numbers are super important.
Right.
So definitely keep that in mind when people are throwing around numbers. That for sure.
Yeah. It's important, and current present success does not determine future success as well, or future failure, and vice versa. So who knows what will happen in 2021 with my own operations. Like I said, I am pulling away focus from private label, and it's not because it's not a good business. It's because I'm more interested in this other experiment that I have going on with Big Black Tea, and that's just where I'm choosing to put some of my extra time outside of the full-time things that are going on a Viral Launch as well.
For sure. Yeah, and the Big Black Tea sounds like a lot of fun, building that out and just running that experiment. It's always fun to try different things, for sure.
Yeah. I got lost in Amazon for a while. I think I got lost largely in numbers. I mean, we're talking about numbers, but it's easy to get lost in profit, I think. And perhaps this is a little bit of a privileged thing to say from what I would largely contribute to. Honestly, I feel like I got pretty lucky with some of the Amazon private label stuff. And I think that a lot of private label sellers would say something similar, like they almost feel like they got lucky. And I would say that same thing for myself. Like, I feel really fortunate that I stumbled into the niche that I did in the products that I did. And in that, honestly, I started asking myself, like, why I was in what I was in. And the answer was largely for the money, not necessarily for anything else. And I'm not really someone who's just in something for the money. That's not what really drives me, even though it's really nice. And that's why I am willing to take focus a bit away from private label and focus on the Big Black Tea. And that's what I've come to learn myself in my own operations is I think I'm more willing to focus on things that interest me a bit more, and that I feel just a little bit more passion is a kind of a trigger word, but passionate about, as opposed to just finding the most data specific oriented products that work the best according to any software. I'm more about the brand, the cohesive behavior. And that's not going to be everybody but that's me.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind now on the luck topic, because a lot of people, I think, look at someone successful and say, well, he got lucky, they got in at the right time or just stumbled on the right product. But I really like to look at it in, you put yourself in a position for luck to find you. If you're just on your couch watching Netflix, you would have never been able to have the chance to get lucky. So that's one thing to really keep in mind when you're looking at people that maybe got lucky, but they put themselves there for luck.
No, that's so good. You make room for the luck, right? You got to make room for the luck to happen. No, that's so good. It's a good mindset to put people in, I think.
For sure. So where do you see the future going? Let's shift gears into the future. Sure. Where are we headed with Amazon? Dive into that a little bit more.
We already talked about, I think, one of the biggest things, which is branding. I mean, if branding is not on your top of mind already, then it should be by now. If it's not on top of mind already, then it will be. But branding, and what does branding mean? That means creating a cohesive product experience for your customers. It means being able to grab the attention of your buyers. It means just having a visually pleasing brand. It means figuring out ways to grow your personal brand, like you yourself, you as a human being, your social media presence. I think branding is going to be huge in business. It's going to be huge. It is huge in business. It's huge in e-commerce. We're already seeing the importance of it right now. And I think we'll see the elevation of that in 2021 specifically. I think that's largely in Amazon and e-commerce. Shipping is a big question in a lot of people's minds. When I say that, I mean like Amazon handling shipping logistics versus something like Deliver handling shipping logistics. So like a 3PL, meaning for people who aren't familiar with what a 3PL is, an organization outside of Amazon that handles all the shipping of your products. We saw some kind of breakdown when COVID hit in March. We saw Amazon break down in fulfillment. If you're an Amazon shopper and you tried to buy a product, you saw shipping go from like a 2-day prime to something like a 7 to 10-day prime, which is outrageous. It's not actually that bad, but for those of us who are conditioned for like a 2-day prime shipping, the 10-day was rough for customers. And that got a lot of sellers to think about if Amazon was right for them to use shipping for products or whether they want to go over something like Deliver. So I think Deliver is going to be a huge thing. PPC is a large focus for Amazon sellers in 2021 and beyond. And the focus is on advertising in general is only going to get more and more important. Off Amazon advertising, using influencer marketing, using things like Facebook and Instagram shopping to elevate your product marketing, affiliate marketing, things like that. Those are the biggest things, at least that come to instant mind for what I'm focusing on and what I know a lot of other sellers are focusing on as well.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Lots of fun things coming up in the future. The future looks, to me, really bright on Amazon for sure. And it was interesting to see Amazon is, because they were using Deliverr, but now they're building out their own services to really compete head to head with Amazon. Right.
And I'll be curious to see where that goes. I mean, Shopify also has built out their own shipping infrastructure for products. I think that shipping will be an interesting game in 2021 and 2022. I think we'll see Deliverr come out. I think we'll see other competitors come out as well, especially since sellers are starting to really think about putting products into other platforms like eBay, Wish, Shopify, other things, especially since Deliverr is integrated into all of them and Amazon doesn't really want to play as kindly with other platforms. We're going to start to see a lot of people make some decisions to break a little bit further outside of just the Amazon ecosystem. That's my personal thought.
For sure. I'm really hoping so, because to see a big competitor to Amazon would just be beneficial for everything, and
Right.
free market competition is key for sure. So that'll help customers, it'll help us sellers, and just help to keep everybody honest.
Are you primarily on Amazon? Are you off Amazon?
Primarily Amazon, a little bit of eBay, some WooCommerce. I run one of the brands that I have an exclusive agreement with. I run their website, and we sell
Nice.
WooCommerce on there. I want to get more into Walmart because that is becoming more and more of a platform that you can be successful on.
Right. I think Walmart is a good mention, and I think I was talking to another high level seller about this just the other week. I think a big determinant will be whether Amazon allows people a little bit more control over what customers see when they go to the product. So, for example, like if branding is true as a key factor in customers purchasing, meaning let's take Shopify as an example. If Shopify is like one of the key examples of branding, meaning like a customer goes to a web page and they have a full brand experience when they go in, video, pleasing aesthetic, etc. I think that the question in my mind is whether Amazon will adapt to some of that and allow sellers to have a little bit more control in that side of things compared to what it is now, which is the pretty standard what Amazon listings have been for the past like 8 years. Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that with the storefront pages, with some of the live selling things that Amazon has going on. I think Amazon is starting to go in that direction. I'm curious to see whether they'll go all in or whether they will largely stay the same. And I mean, let's be real, Amazon does have a majority of the chips here. Like Amazon has a lot of the control. So it's not like they need to change. But I'll just be curious to see whether customers respond better to the branding side of things with like WooCommerce, Shopify, Walmart, or whether they stick. Time will tell.
Yeah, the customer attention, that's going to be the hard part because Amazon has, for the most part, their trust, and people start their shopping on Amazon. Even if I'm going to buy something from somewhere else like Walmart or some other platform, I search for that product on Amazon to look at reviews and stuff like that. So
absolutely,
it's going to be hard to break that. Once you have that hold, it's really hard. It's kind of like Google as a search engine, right?
Right.
You have that hold. When somebody wants you to go look something up, they just say, go Google it.
Right.
It's not hard to break through that kind of stuff. But Walmart has the huge presence. People know and trust Walmart a lot as well. They might have a little bit of a reputation for being cheap and things like that, but they have that trust for a lot of people. So if anybody can do it, I think Walmart can.
During in March or April through the peak of the pandemic when everything was going on, I live in LA, so everything was shut down here has been shut down still. But I bought the first thing I'd ever bought off of Walmart.com during that time because Amazon, like everything was sold out. I wanted to buy a set of weights because I didn't have, all our gyms were closed, so I wanted weights. And so I went on Walmart. I bought a set of weights, and it was a great process. It was really affordable, and I had a good experience. And that's what got me thinking for the first time, like, oh, okay, if Walmart takes this, it could actually turn into something. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do that more intentionally. I became really used to just buying everything on Amazon, and so I'm intentionally trying to make myself go outside of Amazon to see those other experiences, but also try to help that competition along a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. The future is bright for e-commerce sellers. 2021 we were talking about before the show, like COVID has accelerated so much. And I think we saw what e-commerce was inevitable to turn into, but I think it just got pushed back and pushed up. And that's the question to beginners of like, well, should I get started or not? It's a great question to ask yourself. The answer is now is always a better time than later if you really want to get started. And also you got to ask yourself how much you're willing to give to get involved because it will take time and it will take money.
Agree 100%. All right, Cameron. So if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to me specifically, on Instagram, if you just search my name, Cameron Yoder, you can connect with me. always willing to talk through my perspective on e-commerce. So shoot me any questions. Connect with me on Facebook. I'm active there also. And if you want to connect with Viral Launch, Todd, I'll give you a link that you can send people to. We also have a coupon code for your audience specifically. If they want to sign up, they get, I think it's 15% off for life, the monthly packages. So I'll shoot you that info. I'll shoot you that coupon code as well. And seriously, anyone's listening, feel free to reach out. And I'd love to talk e-commerce, business, life, whatever. I'm available.
All right, awesome. We'll put that. We can put that promo code on the screen up here, and we'll throw it in the show notes as well, so people can pick that up and try out Viral Launch if they want to. You guys also have a podcast called Follow the Data Podcast. So if people want to look that up, they can dive into more information on probably Viral Launch and other things I'm sure you guys talk about.
Yeah, the show, I appreciate you pointing that show out. So Follow the Data, largely private label focused, but yeah, I run that show, and Todd, I'll have to have you on the show actually. So I'll rope you into the show. But yeah, just interviewing high level sellers, talking through strategy, beginner, advanced, everything, all the above. Todd, thank you so much for having me on the show, and thank you for asking some great questions. I had a great time.
For sure. Appreciate the time, Cameron. You have a great one.
This has been another episode of the Entrepreneur Adventure Podcast. Thanks for listening, fellow entrepreneur, and always remember, success is yours if you take it.